Welcome to today's India Today e-Conclave Corona series. We have fashion designer Sabyasachi Mukherjee. Not only is he the leading designer in the country, Sabya also defines the Indian aesthetic every time he drops a campaign or styles a bride. From Deepika Padukone to Anushka Sharma, he is everybody's preferred designer. Today, Sabya sits with us and talks to us about what's going to happen in the world of fashion post-Corona-19. Sabya, thank you for joining us. How excited am I that I'm charging into the conversation? But much before, the lockdown was announced, you took the difficult decision of shutting down your stores and your workshops, and you announced it. This was startling for everybody. A, you're one of the most successful designers. B, you came out completely transparently and announced why you were doing this. What prompted you to take this decision?
Nonita, I just knew that this would happen very quickly, and I also knew that if I didn't plan it well, what the problems would be. We have many kinds of people in our company. We have a lot of people who are educated. We have people who are not educated. People from different economic backgrounds. And the wonderful thing is that my CFO made bank accounts for every single person. People who even live in remote villages. What I just wanted to do was I wanted to give them enough time to be able to go back home, pay them their salaries, so that they could go and do their rations and shop. Because I didn't want to do it last minute, where people would not have enough money to kind of, they would have money in their banks, but I did not know what the government lockdown would be, but I knew that there would be a lockdown. So I just wanted to make sure that people had money to eat and time to buy ration.
But you talked about it being a really frightening time, and you mentioned the uncertainty. Did you have some sort of crystal ball? Because for all of us, the lockdown being extended has been a bit of a surprise, even though the numbers have been startling. How did you know this? Did you look into the future?
No, Nonita, I was just observing Italy and New York and China and what was happening all around us. And I knew that it would be just a matter of time till it would come to India. And I've always believed better safe than sorry. So I just wanted to make sure that everything was going to be planned. And secondly, this virus is very democratic. It doesn't care who you are, rich or poor. If it could happen to Boris Johnson, if it could happen to Prince Charles, if it could happen to Tom Hanks, it could happen to anyone. And right now we are at a very strange situation in our lives where we have to choose between life and livelihood. It doesn't really happen. Sometimes, when you have an economic crash, you don't have to choose between life and livelihood. You just have to make smarter choices about your livelihood. But when there's a pandemic, you have to choose between life and livelihood, and both could kill in so many ways. So it was very difficult. And, as an entrepreneur, and I say this to all designers, every entrepreneur in this country, whether you're a big designer, small designer, whether you're a large corporate, it doesn't matter, because most of us, we probably make between a 20% to a 30% profit to a 35% profit. So whether you're a 10,000 crore company or a 2 crore company or a 1 lakh rupee company, the percentage is still the same. And everybody is in fear because, give or take 2 months or 3 months or 4 months, every company is going to get forced into bankruptcy. So the only thing that I advise everybody is don't feel the FOMO, don't feel scared because of the fact that we are all in it together. And if we go down, we will go down, but we'll rebuild our lives again.
But how did you, you're saying it's really democratic, but how do you balance your interests as a business person, somebody who employs a lot of people, and the interests of the customer? Because at some point, they're almost contradictory or pulling at each other, right? It's not the same interests. How did you balance this out? Or have you just not pretended to balance it?
My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was a businessman, and he was quite successful. He was ahead of his times, and a lot of people told him that he was stupid. But he told me one thing, and then a friend of mine told me the same thing. He said, business is not a science, it's an art. And business is by human beings, for human beings, for human beings. And I think at the end of the day, we all need to do what is correct for human beings, because without those basic principles, a business is not going to really run. In the short term, we will lose money. In the short term, a lot of us might lose businesses. but you don't lose integrity, you don't lose a brand, you don't lose goodwill. Like and I can say this openly, like if it doesn't settle down in the next 2 or 3 months, I don't know what the future is going to be. I don't know how long I'll be able to pay my staff, because everyone is struggling with that. It's great to say great things on media, but the reality is that you can't pay till you don't have money. But at some point of time, if we need to shut down and hibernate, we will. But when we rebuild our brand again, we will rebuild it with the same integrity that we built the brand for 20 years.
You did tell me the last time we spoke that you've come from having no money to where you are today, where you bought this really beautiful home and have done it up in the aesthetic that you're famous for. But does this help, the fact that you came from nothing, made everything, and you're ready to start all over?
Nonita, I don't know if I was a weird child, but I was a sensitive child. I've always been a little detached. I had a conflict with the education system in India. So I didn't go to school for 5.5 years. I had chronic depression. I didn't get out of my house. And then one fine day, I just snapped out and I said that, I'm bored of being depressed. I need to do something with my life. And I didn't know what was happening with me, but I just knew that I had to do something. And at that point of time, it was very difficult times for us because my father was in the jute and wool industry, and jute got replaced by plastic. The entire belt died, wool died. And my father's a very proud man. I saw him washing dishes on the kitchen sink and crying because he could not, he lost his dignity of trying to help his family. And at that point of time, I'll tell you, it's very funny, it's surreal, because there were 2 eggs and 4 of us, and we would probably distribute that between lunch and dinner. But I said to him that, these are the years that have taught us the value of money and how material or immaterial it is. And today, when I look back at this, for a person who never had any money to having money, you learn a little sense of detachment. So if it goes, it'll come back again. It's cyclical.
So if it goes, it goes. And I'm sorry, I seem to be pixelating really badly. The problem with technology. And I don't know how to fix this, but you know what, Sabya, we're just going to continue this conversation. I'm really sorry about this. But one of the things we were talking about is, you make dreams now, right? You create the biggest weddings. What's going to happen to the wedding business? Because weddings need people, weddings need contact. With the lack of money, are people going to spend less? Are brides going to spend less? Are we going to see virtual weddings? The whole thing is up sort of in a quandary, much like my screen, and I'm so sorry, I don't know how to fix this. But this is what I'm saying. The joys of working from home always have a crisis or two.
That's fine.
Makes us all human, what can I say?
Absolutely. And to answer your question, before I talk about weddings, let's talk about fashion. I think what isolation teaches us is the fact that we have too much. We are going to start questioning consumption. Now, many of us are having limited meals. We are having a 1-course meal every day. We don't have much. We don't go out. We have time to introspect. I think, I don't have a big wardrobe, but I'm still looking at my wardrobe and I'm saying I have so much. I don't really even need to, because I wear a blue shirt or a white shirt every day. I think what's going to happen is people are going to question consumption. They are going to, what we are going to do is we are going to start prioritizing and reprioritizing our lives. And if we start consumption all over again, it's going to be a new world and new consumption, because consumption is going to be about things that give us value as a consumer or as a producer. I'll explain it to you further. So if we are consuming something that is helping somebody's economy, or that is helping with the craft legacy, or if we are consuming something that gives us joy purely from an artistic point of view, because consumption is not a bad thing, because consumption drives economy. And people need to understand something, that we shame consumption, but it is consumption that becomes a patron of art and culture and many things. But mindless consumption is going to go out of the window. I would like to tell everybody who does weddings in India that it becomes our responsibility to help our economy. We do so much of mindless expenditures in weddings. We go outside the country. We do foreign flowers, we do international food. I think it's time to start celebrating things that are yours. Just imagine if you get your Shehnai walas back again instead of mindless music. If you start getting your halwais and your jalebi walas and your flower people, and if you get your tents block printed again, and so by doing a beautiful cultural wedding, you are giving jobs to so many people in an economic system. So many people at grassroots levels are getting jobs. And I think weddings are, we forget to celebrate India. And it's only during a Diwali or a Saraswati Puja or a Pongal or a wedding, we actually remember that we are Indians again, because we do our bhangras and our dholaks and our mendis and our haldis. And I think it's lovely to do weddings, because, weddings are cultural celebrations, and we all need markers to celebrate. But if that celebration becomes conscious, and if your celebration helps somebody else celebrate, if your celebration lets somebody else take their children to school, if it helps them to build their economies and their businesses, why not?
But do you think that people are, with social distancing, do you think that people are going to want to do bigger weddings? Have brides actually come and spoken to you? Because how do you deal? I mean, right now you're not, dealing with any brides, but once this is over, how are you going to deal with the personalization they require? Will you be consulting virtually? Business as we conducted, that's going to change, right?
So, Nonita, we don't really consult for anybody, because we keep the business democratic, because we want the bride to wear our our idea of what it should be her wedding, because that's why you're a designer. Otherwise, you're just how do I say, you're just a fixer. So as a policy, the brand doesn't do consultancy, and like, we don't do customization, thank God. But having said that, the idea of making weddings smaller and meaningful was a trend that started even before the virus came in, because a lot of people, today when we question why the virus happened, and I would say that it's a result of all of our collective greed. And today, when I look at the virus, I would just like to say that, the consumption, the mindfulness of consumption that was happening, the pattern that was happening, many people have started doing smaller, intimate weddings, even 2 years, 1 year before the virus started. But what it is going to do, it's going to become a catalyst for that trend, because people are going to just drive value from consumption. And I think that's going to be a great thing. I have a very big hope on the younger generation and Gen Z, because I think they are very idealistic, and I think collectively they are going to push for a better world.
Tell me something, Sabya, and I'm really sorry. The backdrop is really behaving badly, and I'm feeling really silly, but that's okay. I was going to ask you, how do you find inspiration in Gen Z, or are you looking at real people, or are you looking at influencers? How does this work for you?
I have never really looked at influencers. Yes, I post a lot of Bollywood girls on my Instagram, but they happen to be consumers and customers. And like I post customers, I post them also. But having said that, I've always believed in the old-fashioned way of your product being the greatest influencer, because you know you need an influencer when you're not confident about your product. When you're confident about your product, the best influence is word of mouth. It's old-fashioned. That's the way it's always been, and that's the way it's always going to be. I'm going to give you an example right now. Let's talk about Hermes. The fact that when China opened, Hermes had a $2.7 million sale. I'm not very sure about that. And the backdrop looks lovely.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, but this is what we're going to go with. Please forgive me.
That's fine. And, we were talking about Hermes. And if you look at Hermes, they don't really do too much of red carpet dressing. You don't see actresses wearing Hermes, too much of Hermes to Oscars or to big galas, or I haven't seen much. But they are still the most revered brand, because they have built a story on craftsmanship. They have built a story on good quality. And people buy Hermes organically as an aspiration. And I think that's wonderful.
But tell me something. One of the biggest successes about Hermes is that they treat their craftspeople like their heroes. I remember being in an Hermes event where the main saddler stood next to the CEO. Why does the Indian fashion story lack this sort of promotion of the Karigar as a hero as well? Is this going to change, you think?
I think we do. I think a lot of Indians do, because you see, what happens? What is India's pride? India's pride is handmade in India. Why do people buy things from us? They buy things from us because of our craft, and we just become the middlemen who who polish the craft and take it from one person to the other. And it's very fashionable to bash entrepreneurs by saying that, I get a lot of questions from people that why are your clothes so overpriced? I say that, I refute that question with a very simple thing, that everything that pushes for better quality will have a price, because see, every designer has a mandate as to what they want to do. We want to preserve craft at its highest level. And for many designers, and I'm just saying this very openly, profit maximization is not their goal. For a lot of us, we want to do something. Like, for instance, for me, if you ask me my personal goal, I want my business to stay on much after I've gone. I want it to be a legacy. I want it to become a 100-year-old or a 200-year-old brand. So you can't really envision a brand becoming like that with only profit maximization. Almost everything that the brand earns is plowed back into the brand so that we create more and more and more employment. We create bigger businesses so that more craftspeople, like I started Nonita with 2 people, 3 people in my company. They moved into my bedroom in my parents' house. That factory is still there in my parents' paternal house where my parents live. On the terrace, which used to be my bedroom, the 3 people who were hired 20 years ago still run that business. They are more family to my parents than I am, because they look after my parents, they shop for my parents. My mother gets very restless if they don't come back. I think at the lockdown, she's missing them more than she's missing anybody else. And having said that, the community of 3 has grown to 2,700 people. How do you grow that? By constantly plowing your profits back into your business and growing it again and again and again. And I think an entrepreneur's journey is quite misunderstood. It is also a journey which is very lonely, because I was saying to somebody that it is in times of it is in certain times that an entrepreneur's journey is very uncertain, because a person who has a job has certain salaries. But it's only during uncertain times a person who is employed has uncertain times, but an entrepreneur is still more secure. And I keep telling more and more people that, an entrepreneur's journey is not about whether you're rich or poor. It's about a certain kind of a life font. Like, I admire people who have small tea stalls in Calcutta who are selling tea. And I look at those people and I say, well done. This guy chose to take charge of his life. And I think what will happen is, both from an entrepreneurial side and from a consumer side, we are going to push for a better ecology. We are going to push for better values, because only when an entrepreneur sustains and a consumer sustains and manufacturing sustains can we look for real sustainability, and the globe sustains.
Lessons on rebuilding fashion from Sabyasachi. We have a lot of questions, Sabya, and one of them comes from Prerna Kaul, who asks, given the impact the lockdown has on artisans, do you think we should be creating a social security network for them, like pretty much the entertainment industry is doing? We've actually received a lot of questions about looking after our karigars, questions about how to give them social security, and also questions about the fact that a lot of the artisans come from minorities and they're struggling at this time.
Absolutely. And what I want to say here is the fact that not just for designers, but I just want to tell, and why do we only want to question artisans? I just want to question everybody who becomes a backbone of any industry. Right now, what's wonderful is every entrepreneur or everyone is working like a mini government. We are looking after our people. But at the end of the day, the government has to come up and the government has to plan for these people, because there's only that much that people can do for a certain amount of time. But I would just like to tell people that please remember that without your ecosystem, you're nothing. And I don't look at looking after your back end as charitable. I don't even look at it as a duty or an obligation. I just think it's pure investment. If you look after the people who make you, you'll have a great future.
I think you also just answered Sukneet Vadwa's question, Miss Coco Queen. Kayan Contractor wants to know what impacts young women more, celebrities or influencers? And you did reply to this a little, but I think maybe we should look at the fact that influencers or social media has also democratized fashion. Has that impacted you in some way? Do you take feedback from what you listen, what you get online?
Absolutely. And I just want to tell you something about influencers right now. You know, somebody who's paying for a product and endorsing it is the real influencer. So I think in my brand, the biggest influencer is my customer. Because when a customer buys something, wears it, puts it up, and says, I was very happy, there cannot be a bigger validation than that.
I remember you telling me this actually, that real life stories, word of mouth, is way more valuable to you than anything else. And it's something that I've actually taken back as a life lesson. Sabya, Ajay Kumar wants to know, what would you tell budding designers in the times of Corona? How are they supposed to find inspiration?
You know, there's a lesson that I have learned, and I always value it, is said that in times of trouble, in choppy waters, don't sail your ship. Which means right now, don't plan anything, don't think of anything, absorb. It's been very crucial times for us, but it's also in many ways been a forced holiday where a lot of us actually have the luxury to be able to think and absorb. I would say watch movies, read up as much as you can.
What are you watching and reading at the moment?
I was just rereading Kite Runner, and it's a book that always humbles me because I think right now what I want to do is I want to learn lessons of humility, because every day I thank God and I thank universe for putting me in a position of privilege. And I am reading anything and everything that teaches me to be mindful. I'm watching Upworthy on Instagram.
I love it.
Because everything that is a story of joy. And you know what is beautiful is that only a crisis brings out the best and the worst in humanity. And the best is really worth celebrating for, and you can just ignore the worst. It just tells you that humanity is alive.
You also said something quite lovely. You said you're sleeping 8 hours a day, you're doing yoga, you're walking for an hour, you've lost weight, but you also said you're cooking. And one of the things that people don't know about you is if you weren't a designer, you would have been a chef. What are you making? What have you perfected?
When the lockdown happened, I said what would be smart food that we could eat that would give us proteins and vitamins. I have parents, I have people in my house. So I think I started making a shakshuka, and we started having shakshuka and toast morning and dinner. I don't really snack, so I'm doing my intermittent fasting. So I just have lunch in the morning and evening dinner, and that's it. I keep the food very simple. I don't want to think so much about food, so I can think about other things. But I make shakshuka very well, and it keeps me sane.
How many kilos have you lost, or is that a rude question to ask?
I don't know if I've lost any weight. It's just that I feel good about the fact that I've been able to slow down my life. I had a really hectic life, and something that really depressed me was airline travel. I used to feel depressed every time I had to go into an airport, and I used to fly about 3 to 4 times a week. I'm just glad that I haven't traveled, and I've made a mission that this year, once the lockdown opens, I will not take more than 10 flights this year.
Speaking of travel, we've all been wearing face masks. We're wearing face masks as the new norm. Somebody was joking and saying that we no longer need to invest in lipstick and Botox is going to migrate to the forehead. And a lot of designers have been making masks from their workshops or stitching them at home. Do you think masks are going to become a fashion statement now?
I hope not, because we are talking about a health crisis, and I hope we don't put privilege on things that are essential for health. I think it's really, really, really obnoxious, and it's really offensive to do designer face masks. And if I have to use my factory to be able to manufacture masks, which are just simple masks where I'm only a vendor, I'm happy to do that. I will never put my label on a face mask, ever.
Lessons in integrity from Sabyasachi, and absolutely zero compromise. Sabya, we've got a question from Swapan Seth where he says, in a piece for Harper's Bazaar, Paran Krenzel wrote, And with the havoc and heartbreak of COVID 19, the industry is halfway between a pause and a pivot. We know about the pause, but what do you think will be the pivot?
I think the pivot would be the rise of humanity. And I think collectively, for the first time, we have felt divisiveness and unity at the same time. And I think what we are going to do is we are going to know that collectively we are going to root for change, because anybody who's going to be selfish right now, they are going to be just elbowed out. So I think consumers are going to change, marketing is going to change, magazines will change, media will change, designers will change, industry will change. We'll all change together for the better.
So I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that honesty is going to be the most important thing. Honest communication, whether it's brand or it's a magazine or it's clothing. But Sabya, you said something really interesting, which I want to go back to before we end. You talked about sort of a neo-nationalism, a patriotism. Do you not feel that Indian luxury has not had its moment in the sun? When we talk about luxury, the first thing people do is point to international brands. But I've always believed that whether it's hospitality or clothing or, often Indian people, luxury comes from here. What do you feel about that, and how can we make Indian luxury equal, if not better, than its international counterpart?
Okay, Nonita, I'm going to say something very controversial.
Oh, lovely. I was waiting. I was thinking, this is not a conversation with you unless you upset people.
Okay. It's big organizations, the media, and a lot of big brands together who have completely shifted the gear of luxury to something completely different. Unless a product can be made in thousands and it can be marketed, it can be sold in millions and mostly mechanized, we do not promote it as luxury. That's why if something is really embroidered, if something is even sometimes something is very desi, a lot of people look down upon it and say it's backward, it's tacky. But that is the real luxury. What is the word that is going to define luxury right now? A very simple Hindi word, majdoor. Something that does not have majduri is not going to be defined as luxury anymore. For the longest time, we marketed and promoted things that was made in hordes, but just by sheer marketing, we infested the minds of unsuspecting customers and made them believe that's real luxury. But what people did not realize is the fact that the consumer has got much smarter than the manufacturer. It's the consumer who's going to drive change by saying, what you're saying is wrong. I do not believe that's luxury. What I believe, luxury is completely different. And trust me, after the COVID-19 is over, it's the consumer who is going to decide what is luxury. Manufacturers and media won't.
So conscious consumption is something, a term you've coined in this conversation. How is this going to impact future collections? Are you sitting down at all, and this is my last question, are you sitting down at all and thinking you will design differently? Will you make something, will you continue the same way? Surely you've sketched something, had some ideas. Where does this bring you?
Nonita, if I have a minute, I would like to say something about my brand. Because I'm middle class and because I understand the value of money and I respect people who spend the kind of money that they do, I've always been very conscious about the way I've created my brand. At a time when fashion weeks were important, about 7 years ago, I stepped out of Fashion Week. I said it's not important for big designers to show in Fashion Week because everybody's struggling for their name and fame. At that point of time, I had 1.5 million people on my Instagram. I said I would like to give a chance to younger people to be able to show. I do not want to hog their limelight. I stepped back. At a time when people were showing multiple collections, I decided to do 2 collections. At a time when people were constantly looking for change, I used to laugh and tell my people in my design team, every time we take out a collection, people will only say one thing. The reviews will say, same old, same old. But repetition creates iconism, and I really feel it's very cheap when we are shortening our fashion cycles and telling a customer that you pay a big packet of your salary to buy something that expires within 2 months or 3 months. I think it's shameful, and I think it's bullying. And one needs to stop that just because one needs to make money. And we are all suffering from that greed. Armani said the same thing. He said, I want to slow down my production. And we have not only, we don't even sell off the counter. Most of the clothes that we sell are on order basis. So we don't do consumption. Because we don't do too much consumption, we don't go on sale. And because we don't go on sale, we have a lot of integrity about how we create our brand. We are a little mindful about how we about wastages. And our customers, for me, the greatest validation is when women come to me and they keep saying that, oh, Sabya, I went to a party, I wore an outfit of yours which was 17 years old, and people look at it and they loved it, and it's still so relevant. I think what people are going to do, people are going to start investing in classics. If you have built your brand with integrity, if you have great quality, and if you are going to give people a chance to be able to look at your product as investment and not something that's transient and fashionable, because I think fashion is going to morph into clothing, you're going to become the brand of the future.
Thank you so much, Sabya, for that lovely conversation. And to everybody who was watching, I guess you got a really nice glimpse of what work from home looks like. If only all our homes look like yours, Sabya. But thank you so much for joining us and for speaking through this absolute sort of distracting backdrop. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you with us.
By the way, guys, this is the Instagram office. This is
it's a beautiful office. This is not my Instagram office. I need to make that clear. Thank you so much for allowing us to peek into your Instagram home and into your mind.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.